My wife shoved me out of the car at the gate, too ashamed to be seen with me. She had no idea whose house we had just pulled up to. It was mine. That morning, Grace inspected my shirt like a customs officer. "Wear the blue tie," she said. "Clients are watching tonight." It was the biggest gala of her career, hosted by the Bancole Group. I only half listened. I already knew that name better than she did. 8 years ago, I walked out of a mansion and never looked back. I traded chandeliers for a warehouse badge, and I never told her why. Grace only knew the clerk who came home smelling of diesel and cardboard. We drove into the city as the sun dipped behind glass towers. Traffic thickened near Victoria Island, glittering SUVs bumper to bumper. Grace's phone buzzed. Susan again. "Is that really the car you're arriving in? If this story already has you hooked, tap like." Her knuckles went white on the door handle. Something in her had decided. Ahead, wrought iron gates rose taller than any house we had ever owned. She didn't slow the car near the entrance. She stopped short of it. "Get out here," Grace said, already reaching across me to pop my door open. "I'll tell them the car broke down further up the road." I stepped onto the gravel shoulder without a word of protest. She was already pulling away before my door had fully closed behind me. The taillights shrank toward gates I would have known blindfolded. Gates carved with a family crest I hadn't seen in 8 long years. Every column, every hedge, every lamp along that drive was carved into my memory, long before Grace ever knew my name. This was not a client's mansion rented out for the night. This was the house where I had learned to walk. 2 gatemen in crisp navy uniforms straightened the instant my face passed under the lamplight at the entrance. "Young Master Daniel," one whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make the moment disappear. I hadn't heard that title spoken aloud in 8 years. It still fit me like an old coat pulled from storage. A radio crackled to life in the guard's hand, and somewhere inside the compound, a household scrambled into motion. Through the open gate, I could already hear the gala, strings and laughter drifting out like smoke over the hedges. Somewhere in that glittering crowd, Grace was already spinning a story to Susan about a car that had broken down. Susan raised an eyebrow over her glass. A whole car on the one night it mattered most? Back at the gate, a tall man in gray came striding down the drive faster than his years should allow. Solomon had opened that same gate for me 1,000 times when I was still a boy in short trousers. Now his composed butler's face cracked wide open, and for once in his life, he forgot to bow first. "You came back," he said, voice unsteady. "On the one night your father finally stopped waiting by the window." Inside those walls, no one but Solomon and 2 guards yet knew who had just stepped back onto the grounds. 2 floors up, my father was still dressing, still unaware his only son was standing on his own front lawn. He had thrown this same gala every single year since I left, quietly hoping I would walk in unannounced. This year, for the first time, he was right, and he did not even know it yet. Solomon steered me away from the crowded front doors toward the quiet side garden he knew I would prefer. "Let me announce you properly," he said. "You've earned at least that much after all this time." I caught my reflection in a darkened window and barely recognized the plain, tired man staring back at me. 8 years of warehouse shifts had sanded something off me. I wasn't sure yet if it was armor or just scars. Somewhere behind me, more headlights kept arriving. Somewhere ahead, a party had no idea what it was about to lose its balance over. I straightened my plain jacket and for the first time in 8 years, walked toward my father's front door. Solomon paused at the threshold and looked back at me once, as if checking I hadn't changed my mind, and fled. Solomon led me through a side door into a hallway lined with portraits of ancestors I hadn't looked at in 8 years. One portrait was missing entirely, a pale rectangle on the wallpaper where mine used to hang. My father had taken it down the week I left, unable to look at it every day. I remembered the night I walked out just as clearly as I remembered the reason why. My mother had died that spring, and within a month, 3 women were paraded before me as suitable brides for the heir. Not one of them asked my name before asking about the family shares. I told my father I wanted to be loved as a man, not acquired as an asset. He called it foolish pride. I called it the only inheritance that mattered to me. So I left with 1 suitcase, a warehouse job listing torn from a newspaper, and a promise to prove myself on my own name. 2 years later, I met Grace at a bus stop in the rain, and I never once mentioned where I came from. I wanted, just once in my life, to be chosen for exactly who I was and nothing else. Solomon's voice pulled me back. "Your father is 1 floor above us. Are you ready?" I wasn't sure I would ever be ready. I nodded anyway. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, Grace had found her footing again among the chandeliers and champagne trays. "Your husband really couldn't make it?" a client asked, eyeing the empty space beside her. "He's shy around new people," Grace said smoothly, the lies sliding out easier than she expected. Susan sidled up beside her, sunglasses still perched on her head, one eyebrow permanently raised. "Shy or embarrassed?" Susan murmured. "There's a difference, and everyone in this room can smell it." Grace opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, because some part of her knew Susan was right. A hush rippled through the far end of the ballroom, starting near the grand staircase and spreading like water. At the top of the stairs, my father appeared in his navy agbada, ebony cane in hand, scanning the room out of habit. Every year he searched that crowd the same way, hoping for a face that never came. This year, before he had even finished scanning, Solomon appeared beside him and said 3 words that changed his face entirely. "Your son is here," Solomon said. "He is standing at the bottom of your own staircase." My father's cane trembled once against the marble floor before he found his footing again. From the bottom of the stairs, I watched 8 years cross his face in under 3 seconds. He didn't call my name across the crowd. He simply started walking down, faster than a man his age should move. Guests turned to follow his path, murmuring, sensing something was happening before they understood what it was. Across the room, Grace turned too, drawn by the sudden hush, still holding her champagne glass. She could see a man in a plain jacket, standing at the bottom of the stairs. She could not yet see his face. My father reached the last step and stopped one stride away from me, as if afraid I might vanish if he moved too fast. "Daniel," he said, and the whole ballroom seemed to hear it, even the ones pretending not to listen. "I'm here, Papa," I said, and 8 years folded down into 2 words. He crossed the last step and pulled me into an embrace that smelled exactly like I remembered: cedar and old books. For a moment, neither of us cared that 200 guests were watching the trillionaire weep into his son's shoulder. Across the room, Grace's champagne glass tilted slightly in her hand, as recognition began, impossibly, to dawn. That jacket, that posture, that was the man who had gotten out of her car an hour ago. The room seemed to tilt under her feet, and for once in her life, Susan had nothing clever to say. "That's Daniel," Susan whispered. "You're Daniel. That's the Benkel heir everyone's been talking about for years." Grace set her glass down on a passing tray, because her hand could no longer be trusted to hold it steady. An hour ago, she had told a man to get out of her car so no one would see them together. Now that same man stood at the center of the room she had come to impress, being embraced by the richest man in the country. My father finally released me and turned, cane in hand, to face the silent, watching crowd. "Forgive the interruption," he said, voice steady again. "My son has come home. Nothing tonight matters more than that." Applause rippled through the ballroom, polite and genuine at once, the kind reserved for stories people had heard about for years. Even the household staff who had known me as a boy lingered near the edges of the room, unwilling to miss a single minute of it. A waiter offered my father a fresh drink, but he waved it off, one hand still resting on my shoulder, as if to prove I was real. Near the buffet, 2 elderly guests whispered that they remembered me as a boy running through this very ballroom in socks. The string quartet found its rhythm again, filling the room with something warm enough to hold the moment without rushing it. Somewhere in that applause, Grace was pushing through the crowd toward us, her face arranging itself into something like joy. "Daniel," she called out, loud enough for the nearest guest to turn. "My husband, I can't believe it." I looked at her outstretched arms, and for the first time all evening, did not move to meet them. My father's eyes moved from her forced smile to my stillness, and understanding settled quietly onto his face. "You must be Grace," he said evenly. "Solomon mentioned you arrived a little earlier than your husband." Grace's smile flickered like a bulb about to fail. "There was a small mix-up with the car." "There's no mix-up to explain," I said quietly. "Grace asked me to step out of the car before we reached the gate." The words landed softly, but in that quiet ballroom, they carried further than any shout could have. Grace's forced smile finally gave up entirely, and something rawer and more honest replaced it. "I didn't know," she said, so quietly only the people closest could hear her. "I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's not really the part that hurts." My father watched us both without judgment on his face, only the careful attention of a man who had waited 8 years for this exact moment. "You didn't get out of that car because you thought I was poor," I said. "You got out because you were ashamed of me either way." Susan had gone very quiet, her earlier smirk nowhere to be found, her sunglasses forgotten on top of her head. A guest near the back murmured that this was the most honest thing anyone had said at a gala in years. My father finally spoke, and his voice was gentle in a way I hadn't expected after everything. "Money reveals people, Grace," he said, "not because they change, but because it stops giving them a reason to hide." Grace had no answer for that. She simply nodded, eyes fixed on the marble floor between her shoes. The band, sensing the moment needed room to breathe, let the music drop to something soft and instrumental. Solomon quietly ushered the closest guests back toward the buffet, giving us the small mercy of space. For a moment it was just the four of us again. My father, Grace, Susan, and the son none of them had truly known. "I'm not going to make a scene out of this," I told Grace, "but I need you to understand something clearly. None of this changes who I was this morning, in that shirt you inspected like I'd failed some test. The warehouse badge, the diesel smell, the old Corolla, that was me choosing to be judged honestly for once." Grace's eyes finally lifted to meet mine, wet and open in a way I hadn't seen from her in a long time. "I failed that test," she said. "I know I did. I just don't know how to undo tonight." "You can't undo it," I said. "But you can decide what kind of person you want to be starting tomorrow." My father set a hand briefly on my shoulder, a small gesture that said more than any speech he could have given. "Whatever happens between the two of you," he said, "this house has a place for my son again, tonight and always." Susan finally spoke, voice small. "I think I owe someone an apology too, for pushing this along all evening." A few guests near the staircase quietly excused themselves, sensing this was no longer a moment meant for an audience. Susan slipped her sunglasses fully off her head at last and tucked them into her purse, as if putting away a costume. My father asked Solomon to have the band play something gentler, and just like that, the party found its footing again around us. Nobody answered her right away. Some silences say more than any forgiveness offered too quickly ever could. The gala ended quietly that night, but nothing about our lives returned to how it had been the morning before. 3 weeks passed before Grace and I sat down together in our small apartment without an audience for either of us. "I've been seeing a counselor," she said, "not to fix tonight, but to understand why I needed the car to be shiny at all." I told her I respected that, and I meant it, but respect and trust were not the same repair job. We agreed to live separately for a season, not as punishment, but as honesty about where we actually stood. My father never once asked me to move into the mansion. He understood, better than most, why I needed my own walls a while longer. Instead, he asked to visit my warehouse, and stood in the loading bay in his fine Agbada, utterly out of place and completely delighted. "So this is the empire you built instead of mine," he said, laughing for what felt like the first time in years. Solomon started appearing at the warehouse gate on Friday afternoons, always with a thermos of the tea I grew up drinking. Slowly, the two halves of my life stopped feeling like a secret and started feeling like one honest story. Susan sent Grace a long message eventually, admitting she had mistaken image for friendship for longer than she wanted to admit. Grace didn't forward the apology to anyone. She just sat with it, which was new for her. 6 months later, she asked if she could meet me for coffee, not to plead, just to talk like two honest people. She had traded her old office for a smaller agency that let her work with causes instead of just clients. "I'm not asking you to come back," she said. "I just wanted you to see I meant what I said that night." I told her I saw it, and that seeing it mattered, even if we never shared an address again. Some doors close for good reasons, and stay closed with no bitterness left behind them. Ours became one of those. A year after that gala, my father asked me to help design a mentorship program for warehouse workers within Bankole Group. Not an inheritance handed to me quietly, but a role I had to earn in front of a hiring panel like anyone else. I got the job on my own answers, and for the first time, that title didn't feel borrowed from anyone. Solomon still keeps that same silver pocket watch, and still insists on announcing me properly whenever I visit the house now. My father hung a new portrait where the old empty rectangle used to be, of the two of us at the warehouse gate. 2 years on, the warehouse mentorship program had trained over 300 workers, several of them now running their own small routes. My father still hosts a gala every year, but now half the guest list comes from the loading bay instead of the boardroom. I kept the old silver Corolla. It sits in the mansion's garage now, polished but never replaced. Solomon says it's the only car in that garage he actually enjoys polishing himself. Grace and I still exchange a message on birthdays, brief and kind, the way old friends do who chose different roads with care. Last spring, she sent a photo from the opening of a small community center she had helped fund from her new agency. I was glad, honestly, and without complication, to see her building something that had nothing to do with impressing anyone. These days, when new hires ask why the founder's son still clocks in at the loading bay some mornings, I tell them the truth. Some mornings I still park that old Corolla right at the front steps, just because I finally can, and because I never had to. If there's one thing that night at the gate taught me, it's that character shows up loudest exactly when no one thinks it's being tested. Grace didn't lose her chance because she married someone quietly wealthy. She lost it the moment she chose appearances over a person. And I didn't win anything that night either. Not really. I only stopped hiding a life I should have been proud of all along. If this story reminded you that people reveal themselves fastest in the small, unwatched moments, I'd love for you to stay a while longer with us. Thank you for spending this time with our story tonight, and for letting a quiet warehouse clerk's homecoming matter to you too.